I love a good documentary, and Netflix has a lot. What is up, Netflix fans? Welcome back to my channel. If you guys like this ongoing series of what to watch on Netflix, let me know in the comments and be sure to hit that thumbs up button. But today, we are talking documentaries, not just movies either. We're going to throw some series in there, and I'm going to give you guys 5 documentaries on Netflix to watch right now. And there are so many I'm leaving off this list today, mostly because I'm choosing to hit on the documentaries that aren't as well known, aren't as featured prominently on the platform, because I want to give some recognition to those that I believe people should be watching. So you have your obvious Don't F with Cats, an incredible series. The Beyonce Homecoming documentary was awesome. They have Surviving R. Kelly, the Aaron Hernandez doc. I mean, there are so many I could hit on right now, but those are kind of the popular ones. And then, of course, the most obvious one. I mean, this has to be one of the most popular documentaries I've ever seen. Joe Exotic v. Carole Baskin, Tiger King. I want to hit on some that impacted me in a special way, and I'm seeing a bit less of. So be sure to let me know your recommendations down below. What is your favorite documentary or documentary series on Netflix? I don't even know if I could choose my favorite out of these 5. They're all so different, but I think that's the beautiful thing about a documentary. What we're starting with today is, I think, the most recognizable one on this list. But right now, in our homes, it's nice to see nature. It's nice to get on Netflix and choose a documentary that is showcasing the beauty of our planet. Now, the obvious name that comes to mind when you think of something like this is David Attenborough. And guess what? He returns to voice a gorgeous cinematic documentary showcasing the different aspects of the world that we live in, I don't want to say a very different way, because we've seen plenty of documentaries like this before. Planet Earth amongst those titles, but this one does it in a slightly different way. The different areas of the world that we live in, from the desert lands to the grasslands to deep into the vast waters, it dives into the diversity of the habitats around the world. And I think I lied earlier when I said I don't have a favorite of these. I was mesmerized by this show, and it could even be my favorite on Netflix in general. So if you haven't seen Our Planet, it's awesome. Next one is one that I have heard more so about recently, because people are finally discovering the impact of Last Chance U. But I haven't talked about it on this channel, and that's part of the reason why I'm doing this video. If you love sports, if you love athletic events, if you love football especially, Last Chance U is an awesome look into the lives of different individuals who are trying their best to make it in the sports world. So you have these athletes with difficult pasts, and they're turning their lives around for one last shot at achieving their dream. And each season or each part is different. Some parts are grouped together, and you're showcasing the lives of different coaches and different people involved. And every time we're focusing on these individuals who have this chance to basically turn their lives around. So you're not only getting the sports out of it, and you're following their story, and we're basically following them into the world to where we may be able to see them showcase their talents on a professional level. And that's one of the things I love about this show. You also have just the energetic personalities of this show that light up a room every time they walk into it, but you're also taking a look into maybe the negative aspects, those who don't get to that point, those who don't necessarily make it on the level that they want to. So Last Chance U is everything you want about a story representing these players trying to make it. And I, for one, being a huge football fan and lacking in football right now, it may be a nice thing for sports fans to tune into on Netflix. So I definitely recommend Last Chance U. I don't hear enough people talking about this show. Once again, it has its fans, but for those who haven't watched it, please check it out. So next up is The Pharmacist. This is a fairly new release, 2020, and people were talking about it for a little while, and then it kind of died off, and not a lot of people watched my review, and I'm just like, guys, The Pharmacist, in my opinion, it's one of those shows that should have just blown up, because it's such a crazy story. It's such an interesting story, and the more they kind of built on this world, and they built with this one man, who we'll talk about here in just a second, it got to be beyond fascinating and beyond interesting. So, all the way back in 1999, after losing his son in a drug-related shooting in New Orleans and lacking answers from the police, a small-town pharmacist named Dan Schneider beats the odds when he embarks on a pursuit to find and bring his son's killer to justice. Here's where it gets crazy. Months later, the ripple effects of his son's addiction and the tragic death would find him again in a troubling number of young, seemingly healthy people beginning to visit his pharmacy with high-dose prescriptions for Oxycontin. So he embarks on this mission. He's trying to almost avenge what happened to his son. And then he discovers this whole new conspiracy, and he becomes the pharmacist. But what a crazy true story this was. So far we've talked about documentaries dealing with nature, sports, and now drug-related issues happening in the world today. And I feel like stories in that vein are amongst the most interesting of documentaries. And it's not the best documentary I've ever seen dealing with drugs and things like that, but The Pharmacist is fascinating, one of the most interesting shows I've watched this year, and one that I believe more people should watch. All right, so nature, football, drugs, we're going to kind of stick to that and talk the Rolling Thunder review, a Bob Dylan story. Folks, this is a Martin Scorsese film that just was not, yeah, that's right, Martin Scorsese, that just was not talked about enough last year. One of the best documentaries I saw in 2019, and yet I talk about it, and a lot of people have watched it, I will admit, but there are still some that are just like, Martin Scorsese had 2 movies last year? Yes, this is a very chill documentary at points, because a lot of the times we're just sitting and listening to Bob Dylan play. I'm not gonna lie, I am absolutely okay with that, but what we're covering here is a mix of fact and fantasy. What actually went on in 1975 with Bob Dylan's Rolling Thunder Review Tour, and obviously this was during a time when the country was changing, reinvention was happening all across the United States, and we get a peek into one of the best peeks into that time period. I mean, he captures 1975 so beautifully, but we also get a peek into how lives were being transformed through music and the impact of Bob Dylan and this particular tour, and some things that were happening in the background, and you're just like, oh my goodness, maybe it was a bit more crazy than we thought. So if you're a Bob Dylan fan, if you love this kind of music, and if you're a Martin Scorsese buff, I say watch this movie. It's definitely worth a watch. Obviously, my favorite Martin Scorsese movie last year was Irishman, but this was close. And finally, I just watched this yesterday. It's a brand new documentary on Netflix. Was going to do an individual review, but I thought I would just put it within this video because I recommend L.A. Originals. This is a fascinating look into, 1, the world of Los Angeles and how that has transformed multiple lives, but 2, photographer Estevan Oriol and artist Mr. Cartoon, if you guys have ever heard that name, and how they turn their Chicano roots into gritty art impacting street culture, hip-hop, and beyond. 1, the cameos. The cameos in this film, it's crazy. From Justin Timberlake to Eminem to Snoop Dogg to Jay-Z to LeBron James to Kobe Bryant, which was an emotional one, and it will be for some other people, but you have these 2 artists, one who is a photographer, the other who is a tattoo artist, and basically one of the most talented guys to ever do graffiti in Los Angeles. They somehow get themselves involved with multiple tours of artists, with bands, with upcoming famous individuals who turn out to be some of the most famous individuals today, and they made their stamp in Hollywood to a point to where they are recognizable names all across the country, and this is their story. Now, my one issue with this is kind of a mini review. My one issue with this movie is the fact that there was never that one giant emotional impact. Don't get me wrong, certain things about where their story is now, especially, is like, man, I can't believe, as recognizable as they are, maybe one of the 2 isn't making the money that they deserve to be making, isn't getting the recognition monetarily that I believe they deserve to. But for the most part, it is a chill story showcasing how their lives interweaved, how things came about. We do get into the impact of their roots, especially towards the end, which was emotional, but it's one of the most just subtle and relaxing documentaries you could watch. You get a look at the time period when they were growing up, and all of these celebrity cameos are going to tide you over. If you start to get bored, you're like, oh, look who this is, and look who that is, man. It is such a sweet showcase of culture, and as someone who isn't maybe as into tattoos as a passionate person would be, this documentary floored me, so I absolutely think it's going to floor you, and I recommend L.A. Originals. So we have a wide spectrum of documentaries, shows, and movies that we talked about today, from showcasing nature to showcasing the world of Los Angeles to football, man. And there are a lot more, from cheer to the ones that I mentioned earlier in the video. Some great documentaries on Netflix to recommend right now. So this is a back and forth. I need you guys in the comments. What documentary would you recommend on Netflix? Original or not? I appreciate you guys watching. If you enjoy this series, let me know. What should I do next? We got action movies on the way. Thinking about doing comedies. Definitely more in the series category. You guys are the best, and I'll see you soon.